Employable, How to Ensure Your Career Stays as Agile as Your Work from Jeff Gothelf. This is one of his recent books as well. Before I go deeper into about the information about the speaker, let me quickly tell the text setup for the new joiners. Your questions will be posted on the chat window. You can see a chat window, Q&A window. You can post questions. We would be taking the questions at the end of this webinar. In the spirit of time box, we will try to accommodate as many questions as we can in 1 hour. So this webinar is hosted by tryScrum Studio. Most of you know people that are joining. I could see there are repeated participants. Our mission is to humanize organizations. So we have 3 studios to unleash people intelligence and build some good culture in the organizations. You can see we love humanizing organizations. We are a member of Scrum.org PTN. We are also an IC Agile member. We do different offerings from Scrum.org, Scrum Alliance, Management 3.0, and IC Agile. For more information, you can visit tryScrum.com. So there are 3 studios, community studios, which runs from tryScrum, which is 100% non-profit. Scrum Master Studio intended to instill right Scrum Mastery skills in growing Scrum Masters or aspiring Scrum Masters. Product Owner Studio is intended for product owners, and Agile Leadership Studio is specifically for leaders because we see there is a body of evidence between the relationship between coaching and leadership. So that's why we started the 3 studios. About the speaker, I'm very excited to have Jeff Gothelf in our studio. We are glad to have you, Jeff. He is an author, award-winning author of Lean UX. He has recently written for our Employable book. I have started reading that book. And he is also a steward in Scrum.org, if I'm not wrong, for the professional Scrum in the UX, and one of the top innovators. I will leave it to Jeff from here. Thank you very much, Jeff, for spending 1 hour with tryScrum Studio. Over to you.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. This is great. It's great to be here. I'm going to share my screen here in just a second. If you can make sure I have the rights to share my screen, that would be great. This is an interesting conversation because at first glance, it's not necessarily about Agile or Scrum, which is interesting. But what I found is that there is a lot to learn about this process, and there's a lot to think about that comes from the world of Agile when it comes to maintaining your career and your employability and creating a situation where you have future-proofed your employment. So that's what this talk is about, and it's based on my new book, which is available now. It's called Forever Employable, and what I want to talk about is how to ensure that your career stays as agile as your work. Now, the story that I tell in the book, it starts on the morning of my 35th birthday, and on the morning of my 35th birthday, I woke up in a bit of a panic, and it wasn't clear to me exactly why at first, because when I was 35, things were pretty good. You know, everything was good. This was me at 35. These were my kids. It's what they looked like when I was 35. They're teenage girls now. And then up until that point, I had a pretty good run. You know, things had gone pretty well. I started off playing music in college, and after college, I was a broke musician. And when I was tired of being a broke musician, the internet saved me, which was great. The internet came around, and in the late 90s, if you could spell HTML, you could get a job, and I could do a little bit more than spell it. I could mark it up, and I could do a little graphic design. And so I got my first job at a company called IXL in 1999, being a front-end web designer and developer, which is a strong word. IXL was one of those big .com 1.0 companies that grew over time. And I spent a lot of time there learning how to do the work. And then one day somebody came in and they said, "Hey, Jeff, do you want to be an information architect?" I said, "What's an information architect?" And they said, "Read this book." And I said, "Okay." So I read the book and I said, "Yes, this is great," because as a web designer, I was at the end of the waterfall. We were doing waterfall software development. As an information architect, I could move further up the waterfall, have more influence and more impact on the design. So I was very happy about that. And so I took that job, and that led me down the path towards UX design, interaction design, and so forth. So I've got this new direction. I started to head off, and the dot-com bubble burst, right? And so I bounced around for a few years. I do a little bit of work at AOL, working on the software that went on these CDs. I ended up on the West Coast of the United States working at a company called WebTrends. And then I find myself about 10 years later at a company in New York City called The Ladders. And that's where I found myself on the morning of my 35th birthday. I was a design manager. I was the director of user experience at The Ladders in New York City. And I clawed my way up to the middle. I'd spent 10 years kind of following the career path that you should follow, you know, getting a little bit more money, a little bit more responsibility, a little bit a person to manage or two people to manage. And I clawed my way up the middle. And so I wake up on the morning of my 35th birthday and I'm terrified. I can't figure out why. And I realize that what's happening here is that I'm getting older, and then in 5 years, I'm going to be 40. And my biggest fear was that I was going to turn 40 and be too expensive and unemployable, because there were all of these younger, hungrier, better, faster designers coming into the space, and they were significantly cheaper than me. And I was concerned that I was going to have to continue to fight these folks for jobs as I continued to go from place to place to get the next job and the next job. I was very worried about these young, hungry designers. So on the morning of my 35th birthday, I made a resolution to myself. And I decided on my 35th birthday that I was no longer going to look for jobs. I was going to stop, right? Because if I had to play this game, if I had to fight every time I wanted a new job and update my CV and launch it and, you know, fight for interviews and then I wasn't going to win that game. I was going to lose that game. And so I wasn't going to do that anymore. I wasn't going to look for jobs. And instead, jobs were going to look for me. That was what I decided to do. I was going to change the dynamic from pushing myself into the ecosystem to pulling opportunities from the ecosystem, right? From a push system to a pull system. Now, I recognize that's like, wow, that's really mind-blowing, Jeff. That's amazing. Those words are so cool. But the reality is that this brings up a lot of questions. Specifically, you know, you can say those words, but the reality is there's at least 4 questions that come up right away, right? If jobs are going to find me, does anyone know who I am? Number one, right? If they're going to come looking for me, they should know who I am. Do they know me, right? Why would they look for me? What problem do I help them solve? What do I do to make them successful? How would they find me, right? What is it where would my online presence be? We had LinkedIn, we had Google, certainly in 2008. How would they find me? And then equally as important is, if jobs are going to find me, if opportunities are going to find me, what kind of opportunities do I want finding me, right? What kind of work do I want? I don't want just any job showing up. I want jobs that I actually want to do and that I can do and that I'm good at. And so I set out, since then, really, this slide says 10 plus years, it's been 12 years at this point, right? To answer those questions. And to answer those questions, I realized I had to build a platform around myself, a platform that allowed people to know who I am, to know what I do, to know what I can help them with, and to attract the kind of opportunities that I'm looking for. And in doing so, I recognized that there were at least 5 qualities that I found in myself to becoming forever employable. And there were 5 steps, specific steps that I took to achieving this. And when you add all these things up, it comes down to this, and this was the biggest realization for me, is that to become forever employable, you have to treat your career and your professional development as a product. In the same way that we think about our digital products and services, we have to think about our careers and our professional development the same way and treat them like a product, continuously learning and continuously improving. In hindsight, there were 5 qualities that I recognized to becoming forever employable. And these are those 5 qualities that I found in myself ultimately. They're entrepreneurialism, self-confidence, continuous learning, improvement, and reinvention. And if this sounds familiar, it should, right? Because this is agile, or this is agility at least, right? It's the same kind of concepts that we look for in our teams, and in our product design processes and ways of working. But instead of focusing on products, we're focusing on our careers, our professional development, and our growth. It took me a long time to realize that I actually had each one of these qualities, because initially, right, I didn't think I actually had all of them. I had to really kind of find things that I had done in my past that would inspire me to continue doing this and to push to build this platform of thought leadership and expertise around myself. And the first of those is entrepreneurialism. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur, right? I was never the ideas guy. I was always the execution guy. But in looking through the things that I had done in my life, playing in bands, being a musician was actually an entrepreneurial venture. Bands are startups, and I ran the bands that I played in. I managed them. And I knew how to run those businesses, and I knew how to build take ideas and put them out there and you know, attempt to create something out of nothing. And that is entrepreneurialism. So I leaned into that spirit to reach out and start to build this thought leadership and recognize the expertise platform. When it came to self-confidence, certainly being on stage in bands helped a lot, but I was looking, you know, this is going to be new territory for me. I've been working very traditionally up until this point, right? Just kind of moving from one job to the next. I needed to figure out what I'd done in my past to help build my self-confidence, to put myself out there, to prove to myself that I can thrive in any situation. Well, it turns out one of the things that I had done in my life was I joined the circus. I spent 6 months when I was 22 on the road with a circus. I lived in that truck there on the left, the one that says circus on it. I lived in there with 7 other guys for 6 months, and I learned how to survive in that very surreal environment. I have many, many stories I could share with you, but the big takeaway is that I learned to build my self-confidence. I learned to take advantage of new surroundings, to make new friends, and to put myself out there in a professional capacity in a way I'd never done before. So I leaned into that to help build my platform. Continuous learning is something that you've got to do. You've got to start to do to build that expertise and that thought leadership and that personal brand. And for me, it's about reading and speaking and engaging in the community, and then using that to build your content. And so coming to meetups like this, very, very important. And so I continue to learn and get better and ask questions about the things that I don't know. Continuous improvement. Now, you might know this from product development, but you've got to improve your ways of working as well. Just because you might be good or successful at what you do today, how do you continuously get better? Because the ways that you get better are the expertise that you can then share from your platform. I get better, especially around my teaching, by teaching with others. This is a photo from the last workshop I did before quarantine, and this was in Paris with my friend Jeff Patton. Jeff Patton and I teach together because I learn from him, and I get better at what I do by working with him. And as I get better, I can share that through my platform and drive opportunities towards me. And then lastly, reinvention. You know, the things that got us here aren't going to get us to the next place, right? Maybe the core concepts will, but how we actually deliver it, or where we deliver it, or who we deliver it to, is going to change over time. One of the things that I've been doing to continuously reinvent myself is to take the ideas behind agile and agility, lean startup and design thinking, and lean UX and customer centricity and sense and respond, and bringing them to places where they typically don't exist, like human resources. This is an article I had published on Harvard Business Review recently about bringing product thinking to non-product teams, specifically human resources, finance, legal, compliance. And again, this is me starting to expand my platform, to continuously reinvent myself to attract a new audience who will then hopefully bring opportunities to me. That's the goal. And those are the 5 qualities of becoming forever employable. Now, there are 5 specific steps that I took to getting there. And this is my path. Your path may vary, but this is the path that I took. And these are the 5 steps, and I'm going to walk you through each one of these to show you what I did and how I did it. Step number 1 is plant a flag. Planting a flag is deciding what you're going to base your platform on. Where are you going to be the expert? What specific slice of that domain are you going to own, right? So is it going to be Scrum for the healthcare industry, right? Agile in regulated industries, product management for the real estate business, or whatever it is, right? Where are you going to plant that flag? And then you're going to attempt to become the expert, the recognized expert in that specific domain or field. And the people who have done this well, you know right away where they planted their flags. So Eric Ries, for example, Eric Ries planted his flag, and we all know that Eric Ries is the lean startup guy, right? That's what he is known for. That's what he decided to own and become a thought leader on that. My friend Jake Knapp planted his flag on design sprints. Right? He's the design sprint guy, right? You want to know something about design sprints, you go see Jake Knapp. He wrote the book on it. Alex Osterwalder, same type of thing. He planted his flag on business model generation and the business model canvas. That's what he's known for, right? Plant your flag, you get known for that thing. When people need that thing, they come to you. For me, it was about Agile and UX, which became Lean UX. That's where I planted my flag, because that's the problem that I was solving for my team. That's the problem that I had experience with, and I figured a lot of folks were also having that challenge. And so that's where I decided to plant my flag and move forward from there. So that's step 1, plant your flag. Step 2 is telling your story. Very, very important, because the goal is once you've planted your flag, you've got to start sharing your expertise as much as possible to anyone, everywhere, all the time. The goal is to begin storytelling. Now, the first obstacle most folks get is, well, what story do I have to tell? What unique story do I have, right? We get in our heads and we let doubt take over, right? Everyone's got good experience. She has more to offer than I do. My story isn't extraordinary. But the amazing thing about your experience and your story is not whether you've run an ultra marathon or built the latest Flipkart or Facebook. The best part of your experience is that nobody else has it. No one else has done it. You can tell a story that nobody else can because it's your story. You're the only person to have gone through everything you have in the ways that you have and at the times that you have. So only you have that perspective. So it might feel like everything's been written, but you can actually get out there and tell the story that nobody else has ever heard based on your experiences. And that's what I did. I took my experience helping my team build a strong Agile UX collaboration, and I started telling it. I started giving talks. I started writing blog posts. I gave my first talk on August 12th, 2010 at the Agile conference, the big one. This is 2.5 years since my 35th birthday, right? That's when the first talk came out. So this stuff takes time. A month later, I gave the first Lean UX talk in Paris. First time I'd ever said Lean UX on stage was in Paris in September of 2010, nearly 10 years ago. And then on March 7th, 2011, 3 years after my 35th birthday, I got my lucky break. And my lucky break was this. I got to write this article and get it published on Smashing Magazine. Smashing Magazine has 1 million readers. 1 million readers takes this conversation and makes it global immediately, right? Now, all of a sudden, I had increasingly more opportunities to tell my story. I'm telling my story from stages because people are asking me to come in and give talks, and I'm speaking at meetups, and literally anywhere anybody will have me or will listen to me, I'm trying to tell my story. And I'm practicing that storytelling, whether it's Twitter or Medium or LinkedIn. I spent a lot of time on Quora back in the day, Facebook as well, or on my email newsletter. I am telling my story using all the channels and looking for the ones that are the best for me. Honestly, the only thing we stopped short of was making Lean UX the musical. We thought about making a musical production of Lean UX. We didn't do it. Probably a good call in the end. And so the question you might ask yourself is, why did my story resonate? Right? Why did this story hit? Why did people pay attention to this particular story? And I think I've got some good insight into that now in hindsight. So first and foremost, my story solved the real problem for many people. So I was helping a lot of people with a similar issue. So a lot of people were paying attention. I had actual real world experience. I was doing the work. I wasn't an academic. I wasn't studying this. I was doing the work, and I was sharing the work that we were doing. And when I was sharing it, I was doing so with humility. I shared the stuff that worked, and I shared the stuff that didn't work. I shared it all. And I think that really helps to build that connection with the audience, right? It wasn't just like, hey, we got it all right. Good luck. It was like, no, we got it wrong a lot of the time. Here's what we learned from that, and here's what you can learn from that too. Maybe I can save you a cycle or two. Everything I've ever published, everything I've ever written, including this talk that you're listening to right now, provided practical, tactical advice. Here's how to do it. Take these steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And that's super helpful for people because there's something they can take away and move forward on. And that really helps build that authentic connection. So you plant your flag, you tell your story. As you tell your story, new paths emerge. As these new paths emerge, you have to start following these new paths, because that's the whole point of building this platform, is to open up new opportunities. And when they open up, you have to lean into that self-confidence and jump at these new opportunities. Now, for me, I'm out there telling my story, at conferences and at meetups, and in the end, I'm doing less and less design work, which, remember, is already problematic because I am concerned that I'm going to lose my job to better designers. Now I'm doing even less design work, which means my skills aren't getting any better. Instead, I'm flying around the world, giving talks at conferences and teaching workshops and that type of thing. But it turns out that that opens up new opportunities. One of those opportunities is that book publishers go to conferences. And at those conferences, they look for who is speaking on the latest trends, and they offer them book deals. I got offered a book deal to write the book about lean UX because it was becoming a hot topic and a lot of folks were interested in that. That was a new path for me. And I decided to jump at that path, to follow that new path. I just didn't tell the publisher one very, very important thing when I did that. And the thing was that I didn't know how to write a book. Right? But I decided to jump at the opportunity anyway and give it a shot and see what happens. Because to me, that was what I was trying to do anyway, was create these opportunities to pull these things into me. And so I will learn how to write a book. And, people will say, well, Jeff, you were lucky. Right? You got offered a book deal. And you're right. I was lucky. But I do believe that this statement is true. I do believe that luck is being prepared for opportunity. So I was creating the kind of feedback loop, the content, the material, the platform that would generate these types of opportunities, so that when they came in, I was ready to jump on them. And that's what following the new path means. And to be clear, I didn't know how to write a book, and it was brutal, right? So just because I jumped at this new path doesn't mean that I was good at it. Actually, I was very bad at it. It took me 2 years and 3 editors and 4 manuscripts. I had to write the book 4 times to finish Lean UX. It was brutal. I almost didn't get it done. But 5 years after turning 35, now I'm 40, now I'm old and expensive, Lean UX was published. And Lean UX fundamentally changed everything for me, because the book became very successful and really helped me increase that platform of thought leadership, of expertise, of sharing. And it moved me into the 4th step of becoming forever employable, which is teaching. Today, what I've realized about myself today is that I'm a teacher. If you would have asked me 20 years ago, do you want to be a teacher when you grow up? I would have said, no, it doesn't sound like it's something I would be good at or want to do. It turns out that's all I do these days, is I teach, whether it's through consulting or workshops or conferences, webinars, podcasts, whatever. I say yes to everything, because when I teach, I get feedback on my material. I learn how to improve it. I learn how to iterate it. I learn where it's resonating, where it's meeting customer needs, and where it's not meeting customer needs. And I update it, and then I try again at the next workshop or the next webinar or the next conference or the next consulting opportunity. And then that's a virtuous cycle of testing out and generating new content. And when you teach something, you actually get better at it. You've heard, I'm sure you've heard this before, that if you can't teach it to somebody, you're probably not that good at doing it. This is absolutely true. The better you are at teaching, the better you are doing the actual work. And you can do that as a freelancer. You can do it as an in-house employee. There's all kinds of opportunities to teach, to learn how to get your ideas, how to get your stories in front of people, how to have an impact, how to make them successful, how to provide that tactical advice. Plant your flag, tell your story, follow the new path, teach, and the fifth and final step that I've taken in my career is to give it all away. This is the thing I've learned most recently. This is the thing that I've learned. It took me the longest to learn, and the thing that has made it was the most difficult for me to reconcile, because I work hard and I feel like I should get paid for my expertise. Why would I give it all away? Well, it turns out that the more you give away, the more you give back to your community, to the domain, to the industry, to your colleagues, the more comes back to you, the more opportunities end up coming in to you. And the ways that you do that, first of all, is that you make your work and yourself easily findable and accessible. You need a presence somewhere online, really everywhere online. These days, for me, it's my website. If you go to my website, you will find everything you need to know about me, from books to blog posts, to videos, to podcasts, to events and workshops that I'm teaching. And almost everything there is free, because I want you to see it. I want you to consume it. I want you to share it. And when you need that expertise for your company, for your next project, for your next assignment, whatever it is, I hope that you'll come to me and ask me to help you. Right? That's why I put that stuff out there. So you've got to get a presence out there and make yourself easy to find. I find myself giving back to my community locally all the time, especially when I'm traveling. When I'm traveling, if I'm doing a paid event during the day, I will do a free meetup at night. And you've got tons of opportunities like this to practice your material at the local level before you start to head off into the international level, right? Local meetups always need content. Go offer to give a talk. Local conferences, help organize one. If you've got friends in organizations or local businesses, ask to speak for free. Build goodwill, build that community, practice telling your story. Eventually that stuff comes back to you. It's absolutely a virtuous cycle. Now, as we wrap this up, there's a few things to remember, and then I'd love to take your questions. To build this platform of thought leadership and expertise where you're drawing opportunities to yourself and becoming forever employable, you have to stay relevant. To stay relevant means you have to stay active. This is real work that you have to do all the time. You have to stay active in conversations. You have to have a presence in the industry. You have to do the work and contribute to the work and participate in events and activities, right? And so you have to choose how much of this you want to do and when you want to do it, but you have to stay active to stay relevant, okay? If you're trying to move from what you're doing today to the next thing, to kind of iterate, right, and reinvent and rebuild this thing you're offering, give yourself at least 2 years before you'll need that new topic. I've found that it takes time to move off of one topic to the next. For example, I told you earlier I was trying to do work with HR teams. I don't have any credibility or credentials in HR, but I've spent 18 months now talking to that community, participating in their discussions, publishing articles, getting feedback, asking questions. Now, 18, 20 months into that conversation, I'm starting to get traction with that community. So again, give yourself some time. The path I showed you here today is mine. It's just one path. It worked for me. It doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. So pick and choose the pieces that will work best for you and give them a shot, experiment with them, learn from them, iterate on them, and then move forward. The thing that I think you should consider as you think about where to plant your flag, and as you think about where to continuously reinvent yourself, is think about the way Bezos thinks about things. Bezos always gets asked, what's going to change in 5 years? And Bezos says, look, I don't think about it that way. Because the way I think about it is, what's not going to change in the next 10 to 20 years? What will people always need? And focus on those things. If you can continuously deliver to the things people always need, right? the ways that you do it will change. The methods, the delivery channels, the processes, the frameworks. But ultimately, you're delivering the same thing just in different ways. So think about what will never change. What will your clients today always need? And then reinvent yourself over time doing that. And that's how you stay forever employable. And so with that, I want to say thank you very, very much for having me. Thanks for listening. I really, really appreciate it. The book is out now and it's for sale at Amazon. So, and of course, there's more info at foreveremployable.com. And if you like the slides and you want to get a copy, just go to jeffgothelf.com/slides and I'll get you the slides. So with that, I'll say thanks very much for having me. And I'd love to take your questions.
So thank you very much, Jeff. I think it was a wonderful talk. The talk basically resonated with me. I got to learn that there are some principles and ideas that can really long last, right? Take an idea, try to put a lot of energy on that idea and try to sense and respond. That's the takeaway that I personally got from this talk.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your success story. I hope that it would have resonated with almost all of the audience that we have on the call. So I'm just watching the question and answer window, so you can also see the live questions that is coming up.
Yeah. Do you want to lead?
Yeah, so the first question is from Fadley. So what are your biggest challenge in your whole journey? Is it the first step, plant the flag, the most difficult one?
I think so. I think that's the most difficult one, because as you look out onto the internet, it's going to feel like everything's already been said, right? There's nothing you can add to the conversation, right? Like, let's just take Agile or Scrum, right? I mean, you're looking at 20, 25 years worth of content, right? It feels like literally everything's been said, everything's been dissected and reinvented and reformatted. And you know, it feels like that. So yeah, planting your flag is really hard. Like, what are you going to own? And so I think you really have to look at your experience and your expertise and focus on the parts that you know best. Now, here's a couple of tips. First of all, there are tons of opportunities for what I call 101 level content, entry level content, basic. I always feel like we have to like show this like high level of expertise, always show the advanced stuff. There's plenty of folks who are just trying to break in and need the basics, right? So if you've got experience with getting folks onboarded into Scrum, for example, or becoming a Scrum Master or whatever it is, right? There's a ton of opportunity for that as well. Listen, I went down a YouTube hole earlier today trying to connect a camera to my computer today, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. But the you know, and the videos that I found were literally the most basic things. They were like 2-minute videos. They were like, turn the camera on here, take this end of the USB cable and plug it in here, right? Then take the other end, and like, it was so basic, but I needed it. Like, I needed every one of those very, very simple steps, right? There are people out there who need that kind of content. So don't feel like you have to jump into the advanced realm. That's number one. I think the other thing is to really look at what you've done and how much you can base on that, right? So there is, for example, if you've done the majority of your work in financial services, right? Maybe Agile in financial services is your flag, right? The nice thing here is that you could pick a couple of flags and run experiments, test them out, right? So build MVPs for each one of those flags, right? What's an MVP for the flag, right? It's 10 tweets about it. It's 500 words in a Medium article. It's a 2-minute video. It's a podcast. It's a visualization that you made or a PowerPoint deck that you shared. Something along those lines, and run a few of these experiments and try to get a sense of where things resonate, where people are paying attention, where they're listening, where they're sharing, where they're commenting. That's where you want to focus, and just keep experimenting until you find the right combination of voice and content and delivery channel. But I would absolutely say that figuring that out initially is the hardest part.
I hope fairly that answers your question. So I have another question. That's an interesting question. How do you find that spark? You talked about planting a flag, and you. How did you decide that this is your inner calling?
How do you find the spark for, like ask again?
So the question is, how did you find that spark? Which means, when did you? What was the breakthrough moment for you?
It was the morning of my 35th birthday. It was the panic of not being able to, like this idea that I wouldn't be able to feed my kids, right? Like, so I'm the sole provider for a family of four. My wife doesn't work outside of the home, right? And so I've got to keep putting food on the table. And everything had gone really well, even with the .com crash and even the financial crisis in New York. I managed to stay employed for a while, but I was really getting worried that once I turned 40, I would be old, unemployable, and too expensive. I would need too much. I would ask for too much money, and nobody would want to pay it. And so that was the panic moment, and it was purely survival instinct, survival of my career, survival of my family. Ultimately, I wanted to make sure that they had everything that they needed always, and that's the spark. And it's always been the spark, and it continues to be the spark today. It's what motivates me, right? Because I want to make sure that they have what they need always. And for me, that meant that I wanted to break out on my own and really build this thought leadership platform, because to me, that's how I felt like I could actually do it.
Excellent. Wonderful, Jeff. That's a right way, natural way of saying that you turn the fear into an opportunity. That I think that's one of the great qualities, I would say, creative mind. Another question: what do you advocate? Deep skills or broad skills, especially in this age of several fads, proliferations, right? There are a lot of proliferations, as you said. It's very difficult to find your spark or find the flag and plant, because already somebody might have done that, or you may be having a fear of failure.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a tough one. Look, I am, generally speaking, I am a fan of generalists. I myself am a generalist, and I find that works for me because it allows me to operate in a variety of different spaces in a variety of different ways. That said, there are people who are specialists, and they use that specialization to build their thought leadership platform, right? If you're the DevOps person who really knows everything about CDCI, DevOps, and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, okay, like you've gone super deep on that. You're not going to talk about product management. You're not going to talk about design. You're not going to talk about organizational leadership, right? You're going to talk about CDCI, DevOps, that kind of stuff. Cool, right? That's okay. It's a niche flag, but as long as there's an audience big enough to support that, that's perfectly okay. And so I think it comes down to kind of where you're feeling, where your preference is. Again, for me personally, my preference is being a generalist, but that's also my personality. I'm the kind of person who always has a plan B, right? So like I'm always thinking about if this doesn't work, how will I fix it, kind of thing. And so being a generalist helps me with that, because if this one thing doesn't go, I can try something from my other skill sets, which are shallow but broad, right?
I think that resonated with your ideas. Treat your career or as a product, and you see where you want to spend your energy on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
That's a good way of summarizing. I have a last question. So I know it's very difficult to plant a flag and spend a lot of time in speaking. I know you have been delivering a lot of talks, delivering trainings, participating in webinars. How do you organize your time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So look, right now is this particular period of time is not it's not typical of most of the year. I just launched a book a month ago, and so I'm doing a ton of webcasts and webinars and podcasts and interviews and that type of thing. And that's by design, right? That's really just to make sure that everybody knows that I wrote a new book, right? I want everybody to know. That said, I was thinking about this recently, and I was thinking of I think I spend my time, if I had to divide it up, I'd say I spend at least 50% of my time creating content. And I think I spend about, I'd say 50% of the time creating content and sharing it, and 50% of the time delivering work, actual work. So it's about half and half typically.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Superb. Because it resonated with me as well. That gives me a sense of a little bit of fear, Jeff, because having invested time so much in the community, 3 years, 4 years, sometimes you get a contemplation, right? Are we going to be successful? Or that's another question I'm getting it. How do you know your ideas are going to work?
You don't. just like your products, right? You don't, right? And there's risk in that. And so you need to de-risk your ideas, and you de-risk them with experiments, right? So and again, the experiments, again, 10 tweets, 500 words, 3-minute video, a presentation at a meetup, anything like that. Like, you know, there's, like if you go to my SlideShare page, which is heavily out of date at this point, there are all kinds of slide decks up there that were experiments. They were topics that I tried once, I tried twice, didn't really work. You know, I shared slides, but I never really doubled down on them. You know, and for me, those are my experiments. And the things that resonate are the things that I double down on. For example, I'll give you a perfect example. Earlier this week, I published a post on LinkedIn about this Japanese concept of ikigai, right? This beautiful diagram where you talk about what you're good at, what you love to do, what the world needs, and what gets you paid. And sort of the intersection there should be where you plant your flag, right? That's roughly. That article on LinkedIn is by far the most successful thing I've ever put on LinkedIn, by far. Now, I had no idea. It's just one of the many LinkedIn posts I've written, right? No idea that was going to resonate. Now, look, the time that it took me to write that post was relatively small, right? It took me 30 minutes, right, maybe. But that thing, it's got 80,000 views, 2,000 reactions, and 200 and whatever reshares. The point I'm trying to make is that was an experiment. And that experiment succeeded beyond my expectations. Now I'm going to take that concept and I'm going to do more with that. So you're going to see that ikigai thing show up in a lot of different places for me moving forward, because that clearly resonated with a whole lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know it was going to work, but the experiment paid off.
I certainly agree with you. I think one thing I would definitely love to ask you, maybe there is no recipe or silver bullet for success, but how long, from your experience, how long do you think on an average for a person to build his own brand or her own brand and move toward this, maybe approximately?
I think 2 years. If you're consistent and persistent, consistent on topic and persistent doing things frequently, I think 2 years before, like it takes, I would guess 2 years until you start to kind of see a little bit of traction, right? I think it's about you putting stuff out there, engaging in conversation, contributing to the conversation, asking good questions, challenging a little bit, you know, but working your way into the conversations that are happening online and in other places. I think a couple of years. That's 2 years to be specific. I think is what I would estimate before you start to see some real traction. Some people get there faster. There's a guy I know, for example, who came out of the gate really strong. Like the first thing he put out there blew up. And then everything else since then has been super quiet, right? So he got a really nice boost coming out of the gate, and now he's doing the hard work of the next 2 years, kind of building off of that. But I think it's about 2 years. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. So you talked about number of bullets. I noticed that self-confidence is something that you talked, right?
Yeah.
If somebody is not having confidence, what's their starting point? What is their tipping point, do you think?
So this is tough, right? You've got to figure out where you're comfortable, right? If public speaking isn't your thing and will never be your thing, then you need to find another channel. Maybe it's writing. And if it's not writing, then maybe it's videos. And if it's not videos, then maybe it's podcasting or visualizations or PowerPoint decks or whatever, right? But you've got to figure out where you're comfortable communicating and then using that channel to communicate. And the people who do that, tend to succeed. And then it's practicing, right? Then it's practicing and saying, okay, like I'm getting better at this, I'm getting better. Like for example, like the reason I was trying to connect this camera to my computer earlier today is I find, like all of us, I find myself in this situation all day long now, right? So I'm trying to make it nicer. I'm trying to make it more professional. I'm trying to make it look better, more interesting for the people I interact with, right? And so I'm practicing, right? And eventually these live streams are going to get better. And so practice and get better and learn and experiment with new ways of delivering until you find the right format.
Yeah. So the last question of this webcast before we close, Jeff, how does one become a thought leader on a particular field?
Right. So that's the recipe that's in the book, right? The 5 steps. That's the, plant a flag, tell your story, follow the new path, teach, and give it all away. That's the whole book is exactly that, right?
Okay.
And those are the 5 steps.
All right. So I think there are no questions. I wanted to extend our gratitude to you. Thank you a ton for being with us for an hour, finding some time in your busy schedule to spend with our studio. We look forward to seeing you in one of the webcasters, maybe in the future webcasters or sometime once the pandemic situation is over. We are glad that we got an opportunity to hear from you directly.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure speaking with everybody. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
Jeff.